Sega. That's what you would hear at the beginning of just about every Sega game back in the day. And you've probably heard of Sega, or at least one of their characters, like Sonic the Hedgehog, which is known across the entire world. Sega's well known across the entire world for their video games, but they used to be bigger. Today, I'm going to be talking about the rise and fall of Sega. Sega started out as a small service games company. They published arcade games, and that was really it. But once when the console game market started, they started releasing consoles, game consoles. They started with the SG-1000, then they went to the Master System, and then they released the Sega Genesis. The Sega Genesis was the beginning of the rise for Sega. The Sega Genesis was made to compete with Nintendo's Super Nintendo system. The Sega Genesis was bundled with Sonic the Hedgehog, and it sold like crazy, flew off the shelves. People loved it. Sega, they had an aggressive marketing campaign, and it just worked great. And they were doing really good. They were doing better than Nintendo. So they were doing really good. And then for the next generation of consoles, they decided to release the Sega Saturn, which was the start of the fall. There were multiple problems with the Sega Saturn. One, it was way too pricey, and two, they released it without any pre-notice to the retailers. They just announced it like, oh, it's out today. And the retailers, they were infuriated that they weren't notified beforehand. So they basically were like, you know what, we're not going to sell the console. So the Sega Saturn, plus with a poor marketing campaign, unlike the Sega Genesis, the Sega Saturn sold very poorly. So after that, they were doing pretty bad. They were just going down. Their stock was not going up at all. It was just down, down, down. So they were like, all right, let's create a new console. So they created the Sega Dreamcast. And the Sega Dreamcast basically improved on everything that the Saturn did wrong. It had a great marketing campaign, great games, it was a great console. But the problem was, since they already had a bad reputation from the Sega Saturn, plus they were competing with the PlayStation 2 and the Nintendo GameCube and the Xbox, which ended up being great selling consoles, especially the PS2, because it became the best selling video game console of all time. It just could not compete. And after that, Sega decided to stop making consoles, and that was them falling. They fell from being one of the biggest console manufacturers to now they just make games for other people's consoles, like Nintendo consoles. So, yeah, that's the rise and fall of Sega.